As the summer continues to dazzle with clear lake waters and lazy, hazy days, my inner spooky season fangirl is relieved that the days are finally getting shorter. That said, if you venture out into the wild, don't get caught without a light source. The woods feel different when the sun dips below the tree line. This week, curious cat CASCADIA ventures into the wilds of Northern California's Siskiyou County. As Weird California aptly states, no place in America is the subject of as many occult legends and stories as this majestic snow-capped dormant volcano now called Mount Shasta. Personally, the place scares the crap out of me. As a kid of divorced parents, I was forced to drive past the mountain at least twice, sometimes 4 times a year. And when the peak was in eyeshot, I curled into a tight ball in the footwell of the backseat of the car. Thinking back, to say Shasta scared me comes up short. It made my guts bubble, like my heart pound fast and my brows glisten with sweat. While researching Shasta for this episode, I wanted to find facts out for you, things that you didn't know about the mountain. But I had a tandem goal in mind, which is to hunt down the logic behind my reaction to what most consider a spiritual mecca. Let's get into it. So let's start with the facts of Mount Shasta. Visible from 100 miles away in most directions, USGS.gov says Mount Shasta is a majestic, steep-sided stratovolcano located about 60 miles north of Redding along the I-5 of Northern California. It's the most voluminous of all the Cascade Range volcanoes, and the towns of Weed, Mount Shasta City, and McCloud lie in the shadow of its 14,163-foot high snow and ice-clad edifice. It's the second highest peak in the Cascades, 5th highest in California. The mountain and surrounding area are part of the Shasta Trinity National Forest. The article goes on to say, Mount Shasta began forming on the remnants of an older similar volcano that collapsed 300 to 500,000 years ago. That collapse spawned one of the largest landslides known on Earth, covering more than 170 square miles of Shasta Valley to the northeast. Activity over the last 300,000 years includes long intervals of quiet, interrupted by shorter spans of frequent eruptions. Eruptions at about 11,000 years ago built Black Butte and Shastina on the western flanks of Mount Shasta. In the last few millennia, smaller eruptions have broken out at the volcano's summit and from vents on its upper east flank. The youngest dated eruption occurred about 3,200 years ago, producing block and ash flows on the volcano's north flank. Hot springs and volcanic gases seep from the summit, indicating a relatively young and still very hot system. Non-volcanic shedding of young volcanic rock and ash from Mount Shasta's steep slopes occurs during heavy rainfall or glacial floods. In the last 1,000 years, more than 70 mudflows have inundated stream channels. The record of eruptions over the last 10,000 years suggests that on average, at least one eruption occurs every 600 to 800 years at Mount Shasta. USGS and UNAVCO seismic and geodetic networks provide real-time volcano monitoring data. Earthquake activity has been low for the last few decades. There are 7 named glaciers on Mount Shasta. From Wikipedia, the mountain has attracted the attention of poets, artists, authors, presidents. It's graced whiskey glasses, soda cans, canvases, t-shirts, sweatshirts, book covers, hats, car lube joints, and more. Japan's Mount Fuji is said to be her sacred sister mountain, and most spiritualists swear Shasta is the planet's root chakra, or the energy point for all of Earth. And as I spoke that, I had a thought. Why am I afraid of Earth's energy? Gut check? I'm not. Could my fear be a reaction to the raw, unfiltered, pure energy of Earth and Earth alone in its pureness? I'm not sure. Geologists, not universally acknowledged for their comedic skills, joke that Mount Shasta is antisocial. It's part of the Cascade Mountain Range, but it sits miles west of the chain. Geologists have some guesses about that, but offer no real explanation of how or when Mount Shasta moved. Andrew Calvert, the scientist in charge at the California Volcano Observatory, says about Shasta sitting about 15 miles west of the standard arc line of other Cascade volcanoes, a move that took place, they guess, about 700,000 years ago. We don't really have a good explanation for why it moved out there, a statement that makes Shasta's mysteries feel otherworldly. The California Gold Rush brought the first Euro-Americans to the mountains in the early 1850s. The first recorded ascent of Mount Shasta occurred in 1854 by Elias Pierce, after several earlier failed attempts. In 1856, the first woman, Harriet Eddy, Mary Campbell McLeod, and their party reached the summit. In 1877, John Muir wrote a dramatic popular article about his surviving an overnight blizzard on Mount Shasta by lying in the hot sulfur springs near that summit. This experience was the inspiration behind Kim Stanley Robinson's short story, Muir on Shasta. Let's dive into indigenous peoples, the first peoples, their facts, legends, and lores about Mount Shasta. The mountain region has been occupied by humans for at least 7,000 years, though the discovery of new artifacts will bring new and maybe older dates to light. Tribes who've lived within view of Mount Shasta include the Shasta, Akwanuchu, Modoc, Achomawi, Atsugewi, Karuk, Klamath, Wintu, and Yana tribes. The mountain is considered sacred to the Winnemem Wintu tribe, as well as the Modoc, Achomawi, Atsuwegi, and Shasta peoples. Prominent Native American figures like Gamokamuk, the creator, lived there, and the original bones of deceased Modoc people were buried there. Shasta is where Gamokamuk, the creator, resided, and the original bones of the Modoc people were placed, says Taylor Tupper, a Modoc Indian of the Klamath tribes, who was raised in the Klamath Basin just north of Shasta. I always bring offerings, she says, such as water or tobacco when I visit, because I never want to come to the mountain in a bad way. Hopi legend says a race of lizard people built 13 underground cities along the Pacific Coast region thousands of years ago. One of those settlements, according to Weird California, is supposed to be beneath Shasta. The lizard people might have survived into modern times. In 1972, a San Jose resident hiking on the mountain swore he saw a reptilian humanoid in shirt and trousers walking along the slopes. Mount Shasta was a prominent landmark along what became known as the Siskiyou Trail, which runs at Mount Shasta's base. The Siskiyou Trail was on the track of an ancient trade and travel route of Native American footpaths between California's Central Valley and the Pacific Northwest. Some of these tribes believed that Mount Shasta was the center of creation. Some indigenous groups claim a species of tiny, evil people live above the tree line on Mount Shasta and throw rocks at humans who get too close. One tale says a race of dwarves live inside the mountain and they possess magic bells that are sometimes heard ringing above the timberline. My cheeks are burning right now because I'm little and I can have a hot temper. I wonder if those are my people. From weekendweird.com. Many area tribes believe that the Great Spirit first created the mountain by pushing down ice and snow through a hole from heaven, then using the mountain to step onto the earth. He created trees and called upon the sun to melt snow to provide rivers and streams. He breathed on the leaves of the trees and created birds to nest in their branches. He broke up small twigs and cast them into streams where they became fish, branches cast into the forest became animals. So if you've listened to Cascadia in sequence, no judgment if you haven't, but if you have, then you might remember that the mountains are linked together in indigenous history and legend. Sometimes the mountains are scorned wives or lonely husbands or warring brothers. Remember the spirit chief named Skell? You might remember the Modoc myth of his battle with Lao, the spirit of darkness and the underworld, which climaxed with the eruption of Mount Mazama, leaving the volcanic basin of Crater Lake behind. So just as Crater Lake is considered by them the domain of all evil, so is Shasta considered the domain of blessings, beauty, and life force. Native American tribes talk about being able to travel in underground tunnels between southern Oregon, Mount Shasta, and the upper coasts of California and southern Oregon. Some tribes have admitted that the locations and entrances of these tunnels are a closely guarded secret which has never been shared with the outside world. The Siskiyou and Miwok nations, according to Weird California, considered the mountain holy and had a legend about an invisible race of beings who dwelt there. The natives were so afraid of offending these spirits that it was taboo to climb the mountain above the timberline. One old Indian told of how, when his father had approached the forbidden zone, he suddenly heard the laughter of children echoing across the deserted slopes. And I have to add here that often the appearance of children, giggles, or sounds of them playing is often associated with dark or demonic entities in the paranormal world. The idea being that people are drawn to help children, and that's how they're taken in by the demon. I mentioned a few legends about spookery that occur above the tree line. Above the tree line is an ominous theme that I'll explore further as it relates to unexplainable missing person cases after a quick break.
Many people are unaware just how much hypnotherapy can help them, or think it's only to help lose weight or quit smoking. But there is so much more hypnotherapy can do. It can help with stress, anxiety, insomnia, phobias, performance enhancement, connecting with your spirit guides and higher self. You can even discover past lives and your life between lives. Heal traumas, break habits, find your deepest truth, or just have fun discovering who you really are, all from the comfort of your home. I'm Monique Pliakis. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and I want to help you. Schedule a free consult by going to www.innerstandingshypnosis.com. That's INNERSTANDINGSHYPNOSIS.com. Innerstandings Hypnosis. Find your power and ignite your inner light.
Hey everybody, Karen Rontowski here. I hate to interrupt the Curious Cat podcast, one of my favorites, but if you want to double your paranormal fun when you're done here, come check out my show, Paranormal Karen. I interview exorcists, demonologists, healers, psychics, really anyone that can make a family gathering uncomfortable is on my show. If you want to see everything I do, go to KarenRontowski.com. And I know you're thinking, that sounds hard to spell. Well, it is. I have misspelled it on hundreds of tax forms. So if that doesn't work for you, go to PsychicStandup.com or ParanormalKaren.com. There you can find my Patreon, you can book a tarot reading, you can take a tarot class, you can find everything, including my stand-up comedy clips. That's right, I've been doing stand-up for 30 years. If you go to those places, you can also see my psychic stand-up show where I mix psychic and tarot readings. Yes, the future never looked so funny. So check me out at KarenRontowski.com, ParanormalKaren.com, or PsychicStandup.com. And can someone please find me a marketing person to put all this in one place? Now back to the show.
All right. We're back, and as promised, I will share more about that strangeness above the tree line soon. But I came upon a news story from KQED I had to share. Titled, The Mysterious Hole, the story begins with, "We heard about the hole," says a tribe leader, Colleen Sisk, who worries that spiritual and recreational visitors are harming Mount Shasta. "We came out of that mountain, so we're obligated to be the watchers of the mountain." That hole she's speaking of? Well, somewhere around 2008, U.S. Forest Service discovered a 60-foot man-made hole in the forest of Mount Shasta. It seems to have been dug by hand at night, using a makeshift pulley system to remove the dirt. The only clues the diggers left behind were a ladder, some buckets, and a plastic water bottle. Elijah Sullivan, who grew up in Mount Shasta, became interested in the hole, the whats and the whys. Most people know me as the guy from the video store, says Sullivan, who works at an independent movie store in the city. But he's even better known for his quest to solve the mystery of the giant hole for a documentary film he is making called The Hole Story. He has 3 main theories about the hole. The first is people searching for the lost Lemurian city of Telos. Sullivan's second theory is about why someone maybe dug a hole in Mount Shasta is that they were looking for Native American artifacts. There's a pretty long history of Native American artifact looting here, says Sullivan. It makes sense because so many tribes have been here over so many centuries. The news story doesn't actually mention Sullivan's third theory, but the Forest Service has its own theory about what the diggers were looking for. In a word, gold. They think the hole was made by someone who was subsequently prosecuted for attempting to mine the land for gold. Okay, as promised, let's venture into the forbidden zone above the tree line of Mount Shasta. All local tribes agree the space above the trees was meant for the shaman or the dead and no one else. According to weekandweird.com, there is a strict taboo against going up the mountain above the tree line. That was the realm of the shaman, the dead, and the little people of Wintu lore. If you've watched any of David Paulides' documentaries or read his books, then you are well aware of the missing person cases that he has encountered above the tree line of Shasta. I do not want to take credit for his work and research, so please check out those documented cases on his website, canammissing.com. Remember that group of tiny, angry people I related to earlier? Weird California wrote about one tale which emerged about them. They dwell inside the mountain. They possess magic bells that are sometimes heard ringing from above the timberline. I'm wondering if they use those bells to lure in the curious in a kind of trap. I'm not sure, but it feels true. Anyways, back to Weird California. Another story tells of a huge boulder called Sphinx Rocks on Shasta's south slope at around 11,000 feet, sculpted into a human form by persons unknown. Did you know that Mount Shasta is such a prominent aberration on the landscape that it creates its own weather? Yeah, it's time to touch upon the strangeness of Shasta's lenticular clouds. As recently as February 2020, lenticular clouds like whitened cotton candy spun in ovals around Shasta's peak were mistaken for UFOs. Andrew Calvert, scientist in charge of the California Volcano Observatory, says this about Shasta. It's so steep and so tall that it even creates its own weather. This includes the spaceship-looking lenticular clouds that tend to form around the mountain, created, he says, by a humid air mass that hits the volcano and then has to go up to a little bit more to cool off. The strange clouds contribute to the peak's supernatural reputation. So those unusual and frequent lenticular clouds that appear over Mount Shasta have made the area a focal point for alien hunters, that and it being kind of a vortex, like an energetic vortex. The enigmatic formations over the gigantic structure have piqued interest of many the same way Roswell, New Mexico does. Locals claim to have seen cloud-shaped UFOs going into and out of the mountain. The undisputed expert on UFO sightings on and around Mount Shasta is author Brian Wallenstein. I read his book, Mount Shasta Sightings, cover to cover. He sought firsthand accounts from locals, posting flyers around the county, asking folks to reach out and let him document their sightings. If not for Wallenstein's work, those accounts would have vanished. I've linked to an incredible interview of the author posted by John Kelly on YouTube in the show notes. Here are a couple highlights from his massive and detailed book. The first comes from page 129. The location was Mount Shasta. The subject had the feeling they were being followed and watched from above and warned to not go up the mountain. What started out as a leisurely motorcycle ride up the mountain got strange very quickly. It began to get very cloudy as a lenticular cloud descended down around the mountain, like a dense fog almost instantly. They were only going 30 miles per hour, and around Penny Pines, the motorcycle they rode began to literally get pushed backward and down into the ground. It was a new motorcycle with no problems, but they could not continue the climb. Idling and stopping, they agreed they were being persuaded to leave, so they complied. As soon as they turned around and began to go back down the hill, all the pressure they felt pushing down on them disappeared. The next account also comes from Mount Shasta. The witnesses, there were 4 of them. The object was a flying craft, and the duration of the sighting was 2 minutes. Hi, I saw the article on your book in the paper. We have some interesting photos shot from our deck facing Mount Shasta. They were taken about 15 years ago. The person taking them did so through his sunglasses to soften the light. They are amateur photos, but show a lenticular cloud over the mountain with some type of airplane-looking object arising from it. At first, there's only one object, which shows up blue, and then in another picture, a second airplane-looking object shows up in a pink color. I say airplane-looking object for lack of a better word. They're not airplanes, but have an aerodynamic feel. I don't think I can transmit them over the computer as they're just 4x6 prints on glossy paper. Let me know if you're interested. And they sign their name S, and they have the pictures below. And the author makes a note about the 2 craft, pink and blue, in each picture that's on the move. And I thought it was interesting that 2 of those accounts involve the lenticular clouds, because that's been the idea, is that the aliens or people using these spaceships are able to cloak themselves with these unusual lenticular clouds. I wanted to find another account for you that I thought was interesting. Okay, this one comes from Dunsmuir, California. There were 2 witnesses, and they had seen 5 orbs. They said the duration of the sighting was several minutes. Justin Hissey and his son Blake stepped out onto their deck that faces west, overlooking the Sacramento River on South First Street, which runs north to south. Justin, a railroad employee, has resided in Dunsmuir his entire life and never witnessed any UFO-type sighting. As the father and son duo were warming themselves in front of the outdoor heat source on the deck, Blake noticed to the east, descending down Blackberry Hill, a number 5 dice-shaped pattern of motorcycle-looking round lights moving about 60 yards away right above South First Street. The configuration of lights spanned about 15 feet across. There was no seeming structure they were attached to, but moved and shined in unison. Justin and Blake watched the orbs move west, first over the river, then the railroad tracks, and headed straight to the Mount Bradley area, located just north of Castle Crags. Castle Crags area, by the way, is very well known for supernatural activity. So the account continues, as the orbs moved away, the lights faded in and out, bright to dim, never going all the way out. Then it was gone. There's even, there's so many accounts. He has detailed so many accounts. It's a 600-page book that I read for you, and I've reduced to just 3 accounts. So I really recommend that you either you get it online, and I'll have the links in the show notes to it, because he's made it available free for people online, or you can get it, of course, at Amazon.com. Bigfoot. Let's talk about Bigfoot. He's made quite a few appearances on Mount Shasta. In 1963, a Sasquatch allegedly carried an injured hunter to safety just north of the mountain. Taylor Tupper, a Modoc Indian of the Klamath tribe, said, "We'd be silly to think that we're the only ones here in this vast universe," pointing out that volcano is home to the Matah-Kagmi, the Modoc word for Bigfoot, which are known as the keepers of the woods. Bigfoot have been in existence as long as our people have, said Tupper. I haven't seen them myself, but maybe I wasn't chosen to see them. I have different gifts. Okay, now I have to share something from David Paulides' book called Tribal Bigfoot. It's about the Hermit of Siskiyou. Paulides says, one of the most intriguing pamphlets I've ever found is The Hermit of Siskiyou. This was printed by the Crescent City News in 1896 and authored by L.W. Music. The copies are scattered throughout rural counties and are light in color, quite worn, and equally hard to read. The following story from a Del Norte County correspondent writing from Happy Camp, Siskiyou County, California, on January 2nd, 1886, was found inside the document, and it is relevant to Bigfoot research. It says, quote, I do not remember to have seen any reference to wild man which haunts this part of the country, so I shall allude to him briefly. Not a great while since, Mr. Jack Dover, one of our most trustworthy citizens, while hunting, saw an object standing 150 yards from him, picking berries or tender shoots from the bush. The thing was of gigantic size, about 7 feet high, with a bulldog head, short ears, and long hair. It was also furnished with a beard and was free from hair on such parts of its body as is common among men. Its voice was shrill or soprano and very human, like that of a woman in great fear. Mr. Dover could not see its footprints as it walked on hard soil. He aimed his gun at the animal, whatever it was, several times, but because it was so human, would not shoot it. The range of curiosity is between the Marble Mountain and the vicinity of Happy Camp. A number of people have seen it and all agree in their descriptions, except some make it taller than others. It is apparently herbivorous and makes winter quarters in some of the caves of Marble Mountain. And Paulides, for good reason, he made a special note that they said it was too human to shoot. Too human to shoot. Very interesting. So if you decide to go searching for Bigfoot in the Mount Shasta area, know that you might run into some interesting company. That might include Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, that Jeff Goldblum of Jurassic Park fame. Recently, he spent 2 days around Shasta with the Newkirks looking for the elusive hominid. They bonded over sniffing pungent Sasquatch pheromones, campfires, and holding haunted relics from the couple's museum. The results aired on Disney Plus if you're interested to find it. Goldblum and the Newkirks came to the realization that what makes the search for Bigfoot so compelling is that it keeps curiosity alive in what might seem like a mundane world. Well, I'd never call the world mundane, but I love the idea of staying curious. Recently, I came across a YouTube channel called Old World Florida, and in one episode, they go into a deep dive about giants that once inhabited much of the state. Well, lo and behold, when I returned to my Shasta research later that night, I found an article on Ancient Origins Net that speaks of a group of giants that once inhabited Mount Shasta. I've linked to the article in the show notes, but here are a couple highlights. Author D.W. Neff says, I was as surprised as anyone to discover a great many traditions throughout California and the Pacific Northwest speaking about a fallen race of prehistoric giants and a cataclysmic flood which brought about their demise. Around Mount Shasta, most of the legends about giants are concentrated around Castle Crags and the Upper Sacramento River Canyon. By the way, Castle Crags was anciently known as the abode of the devil. Its name was changed to Castle Rock and then later Castle Crags when it became a California state park. In the early 20th century, a treasure hunter prospecting in Mount Shasta region claimed to have found evidence suggesting that the offspring of the Anunnaki, also known as the Watchers and the Nephilim, may have reached the shores of North America in a remote prehistoric area. But before he could reveal the location of their lost civilization, he mysteriously vanished. Could the legend be true? The author's closing question made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Mount Shasta has a legend which has captured the imagination of would-be treasure hunters for decades. That legend centers around the accidental discovery of a subterranean reliquary purporting to contain the treasures and skeletal remains of a lost civilization of prehistoric giants. So here are the details. It's known as the Legend of J.C. Brown. In 1904, a geologist and treasure hunter who went by the name of J.C. Brown was hired by a mining syndicate to prospect for gold somewhere in the Cascades of Northern California. During Brown's explorations of the wilderness, he claimed to come across a rockfall at the base of a cliff. He suspected that something may be buried underneath it and set about clearing away the rubble. Hidden beneath the rockfall, Brown described unearthing a mysterious tunnel of unusual dimensions. A passage 10 feet high, 7 feet wide, curved downwards into the interior of the earth. Deep underground, Brown described encountering a weird array of primitive machinery which he attributed to a subterranean mining operation, and also an unusual cache of gold treasures and relics belonging to an unknown people who inhabited California in ancient times. Among the treasures Brown claimed to have found, he described as golden tablets and plates, all neatly inscribed with strange hieroglyphics and cuneiform writings, unusual tempered copper spears fashioned out of a memory metal alloy which remembered its shape so that the spear could be bent to the point where the head of the weapon touched the base of the shaft, whereupon it would morph back into its original state. Brown also described a worship room containing statues that eerily glowed in the dark and iconography depicting solar symbols and unconventional crosses, not of the modern type, suggesting of Mediterranean origin. In another chamber, he counted 27 giant skeletons laid out at angles to the walls, the smallest of which was 6 feet 6 inches and the tallest more than 10 feet in height. In another chamber lay the bodies of a man and a woman, dressed in royal robes, apparently embalmed and mummified by some secret process. Brown believed them to be the king and the queen of a lost race of prehistoric giants. After re-emerging to the surface, Brown reburied the tunnel, and the next decades of his life are still shrouded in mystery. He's believed to have returned to the site periodically over the years, but became increasingly paranoid and secretive. He claimed close family members and friends he shared his secret with were attempting to betray him, and all of them succumbed to a deadly curse and died in freak accidents and unnatural deaths. During the following years, Brown became obsessed with James Churchward's books on the lost continent of Mu, and it fascinated him with its theories about the Mu in Lemuria, which were beginning to gain a foothold in California and the Mount Shasta region, fueled by an intense public fascination with spirituality and occultism promoted by the Theosophical Society. So Brown became assured that he had discovered evidence of a lost race of prehistoric giants who inhabited California in ancient times, who were destroyed in that catastrophic flood. He believed he'd found that lost link in the story of that civilization. At the age of 79, in 1934, J.C. Brown turned up in Stockton, California, to raise a party of explorers to return with him to the site of the Giant's Tunnel and catalog the treasure trove of fabulous relics. The size of his party quickly grew to 80 in number, but on the night before they were to depart on the expedition, J.C. Brown mysteriously vanished. Nobody ever saw or heard from J.C. Brown again. Other interesting twists about that story are that it's been alleged that J.C. Brown isn't even his real name. And the second thing I have to ask is, if I found a treasure trove of like skeletons and treasures and things, I would be dying to go back, and I wouldn't be waiting all those years to return. I would be going back as quickly as I could gather money and materials to get back there. So you probably heard it in that telling of the J.C. Brown legend. Is Mount Shasta the subterranean home to secret civilizations? Ancient alien theorists say yes. Okay, I'm just teasing, but they probably do. It's alleged that after the collapse of Lemuria, many escaped death by hiding in the volcanic tunnels beneath Shasta and remained there to thrive. From John Billman's book, which I can't recommend enough, The Cold Vanish, some say Mount Shasta is atop Lemuria. Lemurians were the residents of the mythical lost continent of Lemuria, which met its demise under the waves of the Pacific, or in some tellings, the Indian Ocean, thousands of years ago. Lemuria, coined by the then 17-year-old Frederick Spencer Oliver in 1883, who held the wild belief that lemurs traveled to this lost continent using a portal that linked Shasta to India to Madagascar. The lost city of Telos, a city of crystal, or also known as the ancient city of light, lies under the volcano. Some locals claim to have witnessed robed Lemurians shopping in the town of Mount Shasta and painting vendors with gold. Others have described them as 7 feet tall with long flowing hair or gray hair, often clad in sandals and white robes. And Gandalf comes to mind for me when I hear those descriptions. I did find an article about these people of mystery from the LA Times, dated May 22nd, 1932, authored by Edward Lanzer. I'm going to read it in its entirety because it is that good. All right, the article is written in the tiniest font ever, but the title of it is A People of Mystery. Are they remnants of a lost race? Do they possess a fabulous gold treasure? When I boarded the Shasta Limited bound for Portland on a relatively unimportant mission, I did not dream that on this journey I was to make an astounding discovery. Sleep had deserted me at the break of dawn. My berth was stuffy, I had no reading matter at hand, so I resolved to rise, dress, and see the sunrise from the abandoned observation platform. Snow-capped Mount Shasta, the Fujiyama of America, stood before us, a fearsome, beautiful, majestic sentinel. Gazing upon its splendor, I suddenly perceived that the whole southern side of the mountain was ablaze with a strange reddish-green light, a flame of light that grew faint, then flared up with renewed brilliance. My first conjecture was a forest fire, but the total absence of smoke discounted that theory. The light resembled the glow of Roman candles. The rising sun dimmed the color of the scene, and gradually, as a train crept north, the weird phenomenon was lost to view. The thing intrigued me, yet I felt unable to discuss what I had seen with anyone. However, when I met my traveling companion at breakfast, he asked me if I had seen the forest fire on Mount Shasta. "Did you see smoke?" was my question. "No," he replied, "just a red glow." Convinced that I had not been the victim of a mirage, I later asked the conductor about the mysterious pyrotechnics. His answer was short but enticing. "Lemurians," he said. "They hold ceremonies up there." Lemurians? The fact that a group of people conducts ceremonials on the side of a mountain is not an exceptional interest. But when these people are said to be Lemurians, that is startling. For the continent of Lemuria, like the lost Atlantis, disappeared beneath the ocean ages ago, and the Lemurians have long since been known as an extinct race. Just as soon as I had transacted my business in Portland, I returned to the Mount Shasta region, incredulous but consumed with curiosity. If there were survivors of the lost race, I would find them, for I planned to equip myself for an expedition into the wilderness surrounding Shasta. I motored toward the point of my investigation, pausing at Weed, a town near Shasta, for the night. In Weed, I discovered that the existence of a mystic village on Mount Shasta was an accepted fact. Businessmen, amateur explorers, officials, and ranchers in the country surrounding Shasta spoke freely of the Lemurian community, and all attested to the weird rituals that are performed on the mountainside at sunset, midnight, and sunrise. Also, they freely ridiculed my avowed trek into the sacred precincts, assuring me that an entrance was as difficult and forbidden as is an entrance into Tibet. It appeared that although the existence of these last descendants of the ancient Lemurians has been known to Northern Californians for more than 50 years, only 4 or 5 explorers have penetrated the invisible protective boundary of this Lemurian settlement, but no one has ever succeeded in entering the village. At least no one has ever returned to tell the tale. It is of course quite possible that if anyone did manage to visit the Lemurians in their Mount Shasta stronghold, such a person might have good and sufficient reasons to hold secret that which he may have seen. It's safe to say that 50 out of 100 people living within a reasonable distance of Shasta have at some time or other tried to approach the Lemurians, yet many who are known to have penetrated at least part of the mystery will vehemently deny, perhaps out of some well-founded fear, having made such an investigation or having any knowledge concerning the Lemurians. It began to look as though the whole affair was a matter of well-seasoned legendary, and yet I myself had seen the strange illumination on Mount Shasta before I had heard any of their stories, that they are so common in the towns surrounding the mountain. And yet it seemed incredible that a colony of people could so successfully seclude themselves in the heart of our thoroughly explored state. Just then, I learned that the existence of Lemurian descendants on Mount Shasta was vouched for some years ago by no less an authority than the eminent scientist Professor Edgar Lucien Larkin, for many years director of the Mount Lowe Observatory in Southern California. So Professor Larkin, with determined sagacity, penetrated the Shasta wilderness as far as he could or dared, and then cleverly continued his investigations from a promontory with a powerful long-distance telescope. What the scientist saw, he reported, was a great temple in the heart of the mystic village, a marvelous work of carved marble and onyx, rivaling in beauty and architectural splendor the magnificence of the temples of Yucatan. He saw a village housing from 600 to 1,000 people. They appeared to be industriously engaged in the manufacture of articles necessary to their consumption. They were engaged in farming in the sunny slopes and glens surrounding the villages with miraculous results, judging from the astounding vegetation revealed in Professor Larkin's spyglass. He found them to be a peaceful community, evidently content to live as their ancient forebears had lived before Lemuria was swallowed up by the sea. When Professor Larkin concluded his investigation, he had gathered enough proof to warrant him to say that in this village, in a secluded glen at the foot of Mount Shasta's partially extinct volcano, far from the beaten paths that lead to our civilization, there lived the last descendants of the first inhabitants of this earth, the Lemurians. Some scientists have long declared that certain of these early people migrated to other parts of the earth below the continents of Atlantis and Lemuria, are supposed to have disappeared beneath the waters of the ocean, and the Lemurians on Shasta are doubtless the descendants of those early survivors who trekked to the American continent, possibly South America, and succeeding generations finally moving north to California. That these Lemurians who live in California are cognizant of the disaster that befell their ancestors is revealed in the fact that each night at midnight throughout the entire year, they perform a ritual of thanksgiving and adoration to Gautama, who is the Lemurian name for America. The chief object of this midnight ceremony is to celebrate the escape of their forebears from the doomed Lemuria and their safe arrival in Gautama. In this midnight ceremony, as in the sunrise and sunset rituals, the weird but wonderful light that first attracted my attention when traveling on the Shasta Limited is used. During my period of investigation, I have seen the midnight ceremonials caused the entire south side of Mount Shasta to be illuminated in a most baffling way, a light that reaches up and covers the landscape for great distances. From a practical point of view alone, this mysterious village and its equally mysterious dwellers is of vital interest, for their display of light far exceeds our modern electrical achievements, and I, for one, am consumed with curiosity to know how these primitive people can produce such amazing light effects. The Lemurians have been seen on various occasions. They've been encountered in the Shasta forest, but only for a brief glimpse, for they possess the uncanny secret knowledge of the Tibetan masters, and if they desire, can blend themselves into their surroundings and vanish. Okay, so that's most of this article. I've linked to the old archived article from the LA Times from 1932 in the show notes so that you can enjoy the entire bits of it. There are some really juicy bits later on about their power of invisibility, using gold nuggets in currency, and their meticulous white robes. We need to talk next about the missing people of Mount Shasta. From yourtango.com, since 1986, there have been at least 11 reported missing persons who disappeared from Mount Shasta or the surrounding area, none of whom that have been seen or heard from since. And I'm going to dive into a few of those that I picked from the internet. So there's one, an account of a little boy. And I also found this account in the Cold Vanish book as well. But from coolinterestingstuff.com comes the strange true story of a 3-year-old child that was lost in the Shasta forest for 5 hours. It's just one of the many strange things that have happened on the peak. He was gone within a second, according to witnesses. Other campers were thought responsible and questioned, but later that day, the boy reappeared and told a story not of this earth. He claimed he was abducted by a robot double of his grandmother and taken to a cave filled with spiders. A strange story, and that gets even odder. The very same grandma claims she woke up one morning face down in the dirt, having been removed from her tent and sleeping bag while camping at Mount Shasta. When she woke, she had a puncture wound on the back of her head. She said she felt violently ill that morning and felt strangely emotionless, so she thought she'd been bitten by a poisonous spider. She said she was with a friend who'd been sleeping in his separate camper, and he also woke up with a bite on the back of his neck, and he felt ill as well. The only thing strange she could recall was seeing red eyes shining through the trees in their flashlights the night before, which they assumed were deer. Coincidentally, 2 more bizarre incidents happened around Mount Shasta during the time period of the boy's disappearance in 2011. That same month in September, a Los Angeles area man was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and he heard the beautiful singing of a female voice coming from the direction of Mount Shasta, and he wandered off the trail to follow it, becoming lost in the woods. He claims he was abducted and taken to a dark chamber in a cave and stripped of all his clothing. A tall female with unnatural blue eyes and strange clothing appeared and gave him a gift and secret information, which he declined to provide details of. He was reportedly lost for several weeks, and after surviving this ordeal, this person now believes he is the incarnation of a messianic Hindu god and changed his name to Lord Kalki. Another Los Angeles area man was with a spiritual group of friends meditating up the mountain on the November 11th in 2011 and decided to take off his shoes and hike to the top of the mountain to place a rock on its summit. A storm blew in, delaying search efforts, and his body was found the next day at 9,600 feet. So if you're still willing and able to visit Mount Shasta after all I've revealed to you, make sure you add lava tube spelunking to your itinerary. The best of them all, Pluto's Cave. This comes from discovery.com. Pluto's Cave is a firm favorite and was first discovered in 1863 and subsequently named after Pluto, the Greek god of the underworld. The ancient tube extends over a mile underground and was formed by a molten lava passing through the tubes in older hardened lava. The entrance, barely visible among the high desert plants that have taken root at the base of Mount Shasta, is a gaping, foreboding hole that leads deep into the ground. The opening is around 40 feet high, and the height is accentuated by the steep drop and downward angle of the cave. Temperatures are around the 40s, so wrap up warm. Additionally, once you are a few hundred yards in, there is zero sunlight that reaches the cave, so make sure you have a backup flashlight. Utter darkness would make getting out very difficult. A rough trail leads explorers through craggy piles of rocks, which then opens out into the sandy floor of Pluto's cave. Stick to the trail and you'll reach even more caves, although these are smaller, and eventually the trail disappears into the shadows, with the lava tube extending for another mile underground, and the darkness daring only the bravest to continue into the depths of the earth. I have no doubt that Mount Shasta has even more secrets to reveal and will reveal them to us in the coming years. It is a strange, supernatural place. If your travels take you there, watch your back and front, keep your phone charged up and on you, and take time to look up into the starry sky at night. Thank you for tuning in to Curious Cat Cascadia. If you like the content, give us a like and a review on your favorite stream. We would be so grateful. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.